if your child is being raised by Eminem or Snoop Dogg or Dr. Dre or 50 Cent, a failure has been made in the parenting. If I didn't have my family situation and I didn't grow up in a certain environment, I wasn't a certain way, hey, maybe the top person I look up to for inspiration might be a rapper or an athlete or a celebrity or something. Who's your biggest role model? My dad, my mom, my parents. We need those foundational things in our lives. I like 50 Cent. I don't get my morals and my values from him, right?
Welcome back to PragerU, Zuby. How are you?
I'm blessed and highly favored as always, man.
Love to hear that. So last time we were talking, I remember you were telling me about how you don't have a permanent residence anywhere. You're just constantly traveling 24/7. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I'm a resident of 3 different countries, and then I've got some visas on top of that. But I'm still a road warrior. Mm-hmm. I am going to be settling. I say settling. I'm still going to be traveling, but I'm planning to get a place in Dubai this year.
Oh, nice.
But due to the nature of what I do, I'm always going to be traveling around, switching states, switching countries. Mm-hmm. It's just, yeah, it comes with the territory.
Yeah, when you were telling me about like the nomad life, that just lived in my head rent free because I was like, that's like the most sophisticated homelessness I've ever heard of my life. Would you describe it as that?
I call it luxury homelessness.
Luxury homelessness.
So it's first week of February. I think I've been to about 25 cities so far this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goals. And then you grew up in Saudi Arabia, didn't you?
I grew up in Saudi, yeah. I lived there for 20 years.
Nice.
Moved there as a baby, went to school there from kindergarten to 5th grade. Mm-hmm. Then when I was 11, I went to boarding school in the UK, but I was still living in Saudi. So back and forth between the two countries, between 11 and 20, 7 years of boarding school, and then 3 years of university. And then in 2008, that's when I actually left Saudi.
Mm-hmm. I feel like people have really strong opinions of Saudi Arabia, and I know you're very anti-identity politics. So what would you say it was like growing up as a black person in Saudi Arabia?
I think growing up as a black person in Saudi Arabia in the community and environment that I did was exactly the same as it was as growing up as a white person or an Asian person or anybody else, because nobody gave a crap. Nobody cared about any of that stuff. It didn't come up. I don't think I'd even heard. I'm trying to remember when I first even heard of the concept of racism. Maybe I was 7 or 8 years old. And I think it was one of the times when I was visiting the UK and it came up somewhere. I remember being with some white British kids in some random thing. And it wasn't even racism, but I noticed that they were like really curious about my skin color. So this wasn't in like London or somewhere that's more metropolitan. This is more in like white England. And the demographics of the UK are very different to the US. Mm-hmm. Very different. I think people forget that. Outside of London, Birmingham, and a couple major cities, the UK is very white. Mm-hmm. Black population's only 2%. And it's 2% across the whole nation, but outside of the big cities, it's probably closer to 0.5%. Mm. And so these kids were just naive. They were just curious. They were like, oh, like, why is your skin blackish brown? Like, why is your skin that color or whatever? And so maybe that was like the first time I'd even thought, oh yeah, like, I don't know. I was standing against the wall like this when God painted me. I don't know. And then I remember learning, I guess in school we did learn about American history. So of course we learned about the transatlantic slave trade, and we learned about racism, and we learned about Nazi Germany and so on and so forth. So as I got a little bit older, you realize, oh, historically and in certain parts of the world, there's this thing of judging people based on their skin color or treating them differently based on that. But in my actual life, my personal life, my friendship circles, my community, all of that, it was all completely moot. Nobody cared. I lived in a completely, truly diverse community. People from all different nations, probably at least 100 different nations, every continent, every skin color, different religions, different creeds. Nobody cared. There was only one school. Everyone was in the same school. There was no division, segregation, whatever. It was dope. It was how it should be and how I think it actually generally is. I do think that, as you said, I travel a lot. I've been to 40 something different countries and hundreds of different cities around the globe, every continent except Antarctica. Most people don't care. I'm sure this would definitely would not have been the case if we went back 60, let alone 100, let alone 160 years. But at this point in time, yes, there's little bits and bobs here and there are people who care, but the majority don't. People are just getting on with their lives and treating people based on their behavior and their content of character, which it's taken a few millennia for us to get there, but we're mostly there.
Yeah, people here just care about all the wrong things way too much. It's always interesting to hear the perspective of people who didn't grow up in America to see what the dynamics are like in America. So as someone who didn't grow up in America, why do you think America is so ghetto?
I don't think America is so ghetto. I think some parts and pockets of it are. I think one thing with the US is you have to remember that it's such a huge country. And it's the most diverse country in every sense of the word, not just in the sort of superficial sense. So I often say that I think in the UK, everything operates within a window like this. Everything's in that window. In the US, everything is in this window. So you've just got extremes of everything. You have extreme wealth and luxury, but then you've got places of certain cities where it's like a fourth world country. And it's just, you're like, oh my gosh, how can this be the USA? You're seeing this, and so sometimes it's a couple miles away, and then you're like, oh wow, look at how glorious, oh wow, look at that $50 million house. And so there's this weird polarity, and I think you just get more extremes in everything. There's more extremes in the social world, the cultural world, the political world, even the religious world. There's just such a range of humans, and there's so many people here. You've got probably like a third of a billion people at least in this nation. If you think of every other Western country, I mean, they're all under 100 million people. So UK, which is 4 countries, is about 65 million altogether. Here, they say 330. I think it's probably closer to 400 million if you were to truly count everybody. And so I just think with that and with the liberty and the freedom and just people coming in from everywhere, there's just such a massive range. And I think that's where a lot of the dynamism of the nation comes from, the entrepreneurship and the cool stuff coming out in music and in sports and in technology. So much of it, so much innovation happens in this country. But with it, there are also so many fault lines. There are so many things that you can divide people by and, spin narratives to get each other at each other's throats, because what everyone has in common is not always obvious. When you have a nation of such diversity and such range, I think people often forget, okay, we're all Americans, or we're all at least in America, and what do we even have in common? What are the values or the goals or the ideas or the vision that we all share? I think one of the issues that the nation is facing is I don't think people know the answer to that question. And so I think in the past, for all the problems that existed, I think it was at least clearer what people had in common. And I think it's just kind of fracturing and splintering. And there's a little bit of we talk a lot about the crisis of meaning and purpose on the individual level, but I think it also exists on a national scale where it's just not really clear, who's my friend, who's my enemy, who's my neighbor. How can we all just get along? You can talk all day about the differences. Those are very clear. The differences are very obvious between people, but there also has to be that commonality or you don't really have a nation. And I think one of the reasons why people are, regardless of the side politically people are on, I think that there's sort of a decline in patriotism and there's a decline in feeling good and optimistic and hopeful about the country, particularly amongst young people. Some of it, I think, is certain narratives and psyops and things that people are being taught and ideologies being pushed. But I think some of it is just a function of where we are at this time. The culmination of changes in everything from the economy to technology to the types of jobs people are doing, and just not having perhaps not having a big war to fight in a strange way. And I think that human beings desire tension, and when there's not a big war, then people kind of go to war with themselves. I think they do that individually. They also do it collectively, where the whole left versus right, or it can become racial, or it can become this, just whatever differences you find, you start fighting over those when you're not seeing a sort of bigger threat or a bigger challenge or a bigger enemy, let's say, that people can unite against.
Yeah, I feel like one of the prices of peace and freedom is that we start just to fight with common sense. Because right now in America, it feels like we have more gender identities than we have people in our population. So that being said, is it about time for you to break another women's powerlifting record?
Man, I've actually retired from that. I think I proved what needed to be proven. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to beat any of my powerlifting PRs that I've already set. I think my strength is probably peaked. I think it probably peaked in my late 20s. Unless I'm going to risk an injury, mm-hmm. I probably shouldn't be trying to pull, 650 pounds or whatever. Like my best ever deadlift was 606 pounds at like 185 pound body weight. And the amount of effort it would take me to beat that is just not worth it.
Was that record when you were identifying as a woman?
No, the one that went viral was about 530, mm-hmm. about 530 pounds, but my best is over 600. And that's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight on your body, especially someone of my size. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I could probably, maybe if I trained hard for like 3 years and never got injured and had a perfect diet, I could do it again before I hit 40. But I don't see the point. I've got many better things to do than to be trying to get like an extra 10 pounds on my deadlift max.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I'm strong enough. Yeah. No one cares.
Why do you think the most powerful people in the world can't do a single pull-up?
The most powerful people?
Some of the most powerful people, just in terms of global power, can't do a single body weight pull-up.
Why do I think that is? Well, obviously it's because they're not in shape and they don't lift. They don't even lift. I think there's something, man, that's an interesting question, actually. I think it's quite a philosophical question. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna answer this from a different angle. I think we live in a time where I think the connection between the mind, the body, and spirituality have been somewhat forgotten. I think if you look back to things hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, or you even look at ancient texts from different nations and different religions, they understand that the mind, the body, and the spirit all exist and are all integrated, and that they impact one another. And funnily enough, in the age of science, or the sort of age of post-science that we are now living in, we treat these things in isolation. So you hear a lot of talk of mental health, for example, but it's spoken about as if it exists in isolation from physical health and from spiritual health. Some people would deny that spiritual health even exists. They'll say, well, there's no soul, there's no spirit. That's just religious, superstitious mumbo jumbo, which I would obviously strongly disagree with. But I find it fascinating that even in the mental health conversations, all the conversation is happening there, and what pills to take and what therapies to do and whatever. It's like, well, what about your diet? How much are you sleeping? How much water are you drinking? What are you surrounding yourself by? When I say what's your diet, not just what are you eating, what are you consuming with your eyes? What are you consuming with your ears? Are you hanging around with good people? What's your family situation looking like? Have you got close friends? Like, these are such obvious pillars of having good mental health, and they're just kind of ignored. And it's just like, oh no, you just need a therapist. It's like, no, that person doesn't need a therapist. Their life just sucks. Their diet is garbage. They're not getting enough sleep. They're eating crap all day. They're playing video games or just watching TV or just scrolling through TikTok for 8 hours a day. They don't have healthy hobbies. They have no mission in their life. They've got no relationship with God. They've got a bad relationship with their parents and their siblings. I'd be depressed too. Of course they're depressed.
Yeah.
Like, of course they're depressed. And so, yeah, I think these conversations are often avoided. So sort of coming back around and answering that question, I think that in the past, and I might be, maybe I'm looking back with some rose-tinted glasses and some spirit of ignorance, but I think that it was better understood that, I don't know, if you're going to be an intellectual should perhaps also be a warrior, and a warrior should also be an intellectual, mm-hmm. and that it's important for leaders to lead in multiple dimensions, not just in political power or in financial power, but they should also lead and be exemplars in other ways. Maybe that's never been the case. But yeah, that's where my mind goes when you ask that question. But if they want to be able to do a pull-up, they just need to do more training.
You know, I feel like we need an entire Zuby album just telling how people get their lives together. Would you consider yourself on the Mount Rushmore of conservative rappers?
Oh boy, man. I've never thought of that. Man, you know, the rapper in me wants to be like, yeah, of course, man. The more humble part of me is like, hey, that's for other people to decide.
This isn't the fit of somebody humble.
I just like to look good. What's wrong with looking good, man?
Nothing. I think it looks great. That's what I'm saying.
The body is a temple. How you display yourself to the world is important.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're very humble, even though I don't think you need to be. But you know,
we all should be humble, man. We all should be humble. You know, I've met some stupidly successful people over the last few years, and they've all been incredibly humble. I've had a lot of people ask me in interviews over the past few months, you met Elon Musk last year and you had him on your podcast. What's the most important thing you learned from him? The most important thing I learned from him actually it wasn't a new lesson. It was more of a confirmation of something I already believed. And it wasn't from anything he said. It was just from meeting him and sitting down with him and having a chat. I was like, if there is someone in this world who has a right to not be humble, it's probably Elon.
Yeah.
$300 billion net worth, founder, CEO of Tesla, and X, and SpaceX, and like the guy is he's pretty accomplished. He's humble. He's down to earth. He's polite. He's normal. If you were just chatting to him and you didn't already know who he is and all of his accolades and how much money he has and whatever, you'd be like, hey, that's just a cool guy. So if Elon Musk can be humble, then who's got a right to be cocky and arrogant? I would take this further. And I'm not comparing Elon Musk to Jesus here, but Jesus was a humble guy. Jesus was a humble man. He's God. Why should God be humble? But God made in flesh in man who walked the earth was humble. So I take a lot of lessons from that. And I think everybody should be humble. I don't think it should be something that I'm glad when people, it feels good when people tell me, oh, like I'm glad that you're humble. But I think everybody should be.
Yeah, I just know like the rap game, that's usually one of those industries where everybody's just so cocky. Ben Shapiro, he just got a #1 hit.
Yeah, good for him, man. I love it. I love it. And
is he ready to be on that conservative Mount Rushmore?
I feel like I played a key role in this because I am the man who convinced Ben Shapiro that hip hop is a form of music. This was in September 2019 when we sat down and did a Sunday special. It was actually my first ever time in Los Angeles. And he presented his case to me as to why rap is not music. And I changed his mind, which he admitted on camera while he was giving a speech at some university. He got pressed on that question. And he specifically said that I am the person who convinced him that it was music. And now 5 years later, #1 charting rapper Ben Shapiro. Hey, I feel like in a roundabout way, I can claim a little bit of credit for getting Ben into the rap game. So, dude, I think it's hilarious. I think it's funny. I like these sort of strange cultural moments where the world just clashes. And I think we often forget in society, especially maybe when, you work in this sort of socio-political world and commentary and you're drowning in all the news and the stories and all of this. I think sometimes people forget to have fun. I think sometimes people forget that it's okay to just laugh at things and to say, man, like, that's just funny. Like when I see, I don't know, like the Tom McDonald, Ben Shapiro thing, and you're sort of seeing some people online, like getting mad at it or fighting. I'm just like, dude, what's wrong with, like, it's just funny.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to just say, you know what? Like, that's kind of crazy and that's kind of funny. Nicki Minaj is tweeting about Ben Shapiro. You're just like, what reality are we living in when Nicki Minaj is battling Ben Shapiro for the top of the hip hop charts? Like, can you not see the humor in this?
I just love the range.
Yeah.
I want to read you some lyrics from a #1 rap song that was just a couple months ago. So Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion said, your baby daddy is a 0. My back shots sound like bongos. I ain't scared to admit I'm a freak hoe. At least I'm getting my money. Y'all hoes broke. What do you have to say about those lyrics?
Do you know what I find funny is as a hip hop fan of 20 plus years, I remember when male rappers used to be heavily criticized for misogyny and sexism and so on, for saying things that are less egregious than what a lot of female rappers are saying now. So when you watch some of the modern like female videos, you're hearing what's coming out of their mouths. I'm like, whoa! I remember when like guys were. I remember when Jay-Z's Big Pimpin' video came out, and he was so heavily criticized. I mean, you watch that video back now in 2024, and you're like, oh, it's quite mild. This isn't that bad. Like, and you see what the women are putting out, and you're like, okay, they're being way more, calling each other the B word or calling each other hoes or whatever, like way more aggressively than the men are. And, just sort of the things that they're bragging about, whether it's just their sexual prowess or, the color of their genitals or whatever it may be. It's a fascinating inversion. It's kind of strange. It's, I guess, just the coarsening of culture and society. I myself personally, people have different takes on this. Like, I see some humor in it all. And maybe, I think it's super degenerate and I don't listen to it. And I wouldn't want my little nieces listening to it or anything like that. But also, I recognize that, man, when I was a teenager, like I still listen to some stuff where I'm like, man, why am I listening to this? This is super degenerate. And I certainly did that as a teen. But I think if you can separate, I think conversations about hip hop and entertainment in general are quite fascinating when it comes to the stuff that's more degenerate, because I think it does impact people very differently depending on how well you can separate reality from entertainment and fact from fiction. I think if you are the type of person, or there's a young person who sort of struggles to do that, and maybe they're not from a good environment and they don't have guidance and so on, then they're far more likely to be influenced it in obvious and subtle ways than someone who's got a firmer, more solid foundation. I mean, I told you I was in boarding school for many years, and when I was in my mid-teens, 15, 16, 17 especially, even younger than that, man, 13, 14, like I remember when Eminem blew up. I was like 12, 13 when Eminem blew up, and myself and my friends were all listening to this crazy rapper and whatever. Like if I look back in hindsight to a lot of stuff I was listening to in those formative years, like a part of me is like, oh wow. But also I remember some of the teachers in my school, because you're in boarding school, so you've got your own room and you've got it set up how you want. I had like one of the biggest sound systems in the entire boarding house, so like I'd always have like loud hip hop booming from my room or whatever. And I remember one of my teachers coming in one time, and he just came in and we were having a chat, and he was kind of like listening to the music playing in the background. He was like, Zuby, I don't know how you listen to this music and you don't even swear. He's like, to this day.
Just didn't influence you.
To this day, I don't cuss. And people are like, how can you listen to what you're listening to? How have you listened to thousands and thousands of it? I was like, it doesn't influence me. I don't know. I don't play a lot of video games, but I could run around and play GTA all day, and I don't feel like I need to step out of here in Los Angeles and start, pulling people out their cars and doing all this crazy stuff. It's just very much in like an entertainment box for me. But at the same time, I can recognize that on an overall level and on a cultural level, the way that it impacts and influences different people is different. And I know for sure that there are people I've positively influenced through my music. So therefore, if that is possible, logically, it must be possible that there are people who are negatively influenced from music. It can't just be, oh, well, you can be positively influenced, but you can't be negatively. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's also not the extreme of, oh my gosh, the reason that child, the reason that person did a mass shooting is because they were listening to rap music or rock music or whatever. That was pushed a lot in the 90s, early thousands, whatever, that these video games and this rap music and, whatever is going to make the kids go crazy and start doing all this awful stuff. I mean, those same kids grew up to be what we now, some people refer to as the snowflake generation. So it doesn't quite seem that it's that through. I think it comes back to, we need those foundational things in our lives. I think that the amount of degeneracy or negative influence that can be tolerated without severe negative impact is less of a function of how much of it is out there. And I think it's more of a function of people having family, faith, meaning, purpose, proper morality, ethics, and all of that stuff put into them. I'm sure no matter how much, I'm sure we could run an experimentation, and we take you and we just surround you with all sorts of garbage, music and imagery and this and this and that. You might not like it, but I doubt someone like yourself who's solid you'll come out of it and you'll start you'll just be a whole different person. You just suddenly you listen to so much of the music or watch so many of the movies or played so many of the video games that now you're just a violent, horrible, crazy criminal individual. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. But I think that when people don't have those important foundational pillars and they start to look, let's make it simple. I think if you're looking to Megan, I think if Megan Thee Stallion is your daughter's primary role model and primary person she's getting her morals and ethics and values and aspirations from, a failure has been made in the parenting and in the family. Right. If your child is being raised by Eminem or Snoop Dogg or Dr. Dre or 50 Cent, if anyone asks me, hey, Zuby, who's your biggest role model? My dad, my mom, my parents. Do you like 50? I like 50 Cent. I don't get my morals and my values from him, right? Jay-Z's my favorite rapper. I'm not looking to Jay-Z for, moral lessons and so on. So, but if I didn't have my family situation and I didn't grow up in a certain environment, I wasn't a certain way, hey, maybe the top person I look up to for inspiration might be a rapper or an athlete or a celebrity or something. So I think it sort of highlights a bigger, more fundamental problem. And I think it's easy to attack and criticize the degeneracy in the entertainment world, and we should, especially when it goes to extremes. But it's not the main reason why lots of these societal and cultural issues exist and have existed for decades. It's more of a symptom. It's more of a symptom than a cause.
Well, we're grateful that you're not a degenerate, my friend.
I thank you, man. I try.
My final questions for you is, what are the odds that we get a collab with you and Andrew Tate on a song?
I'm down.
What would it be about?
Why not? Gosh, I don't know.
I think the title should be Haram.
Haram. I'd be down. Why not, man? Yeah, get Andrew back on the mic as Mr. Plenty, I think is his rap name. I'd be down, man. Like I said, I think these things are fun, and yeah, we need to enjoy it all we have to be joyful warriors as we're fighting the fight and trying to shift society in a better and more positive direction. It's important to not lose our sense of humor, and it also gives you more stamina as well when you're enjoying it all. So yeah, I'm down.
Sounds good. Well, thank you again, Zuby.
Nice one, Xavier. Appreciate it, man.